Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Citizens Impact, a project of the Miami Valley Full Employment Council. My name is Margaret Ottoson, and this is Logan Martinez. Today we'll be interviewing Tony Hall. You may recognize Tony Hall as an ex-congressman that carried the 3rd District of Ohio for 23 years. In addition to that, he has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times and served as the United States Ambassador to the United Nations Agencies for Food, Agriculture. These days, he is pushing for the Hall Hunger Initiative and fasting to draw attention to hunger in the world as well as in the Miami Valley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
We're very honored to have you on our show. We appreciate, being back in Dayton and continuing the great work you've been doing for your whole career.
Thank you.
So tell us what drew you to the hunger issue, and you've been at this 30 years or better?
Yeah, well over 30 years, probably. Could be almost 50 years. It probably started when I was in the Peace Corps, out of college, and I was stationed in that time. We would have called it a third world nation in Thailand. And I was up near the Burma border, and I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and it was a very poor area, and I lived with very poor people, and I learned to speak a foreign language, and I learned to take my showers out of a bucket, and I lived under a mosquito net for 2 years and ate food that sometimes looked like it moved, and it was a different experience working, and it was a great experience but a different experience because I had come from Dayton, Ohio, and you're used to your food being clean, and you're used to putting your mouth under a faucet and the water being clean, and you're used to taking a shower under a faucet or under a beautiful stream, and to go over there and to be in that kind of a situation was a life-changing experience for me, and it taught me to get away from myself and to learn what it is to be on my own and what it is to learn about other people. When you're young and you're single, you're pretty much into yourself, and it really taught me a lot about trying to understand what was going on elsewhere in the world. So I think that was the start of it. And then I came home from that experience, and then I got involved. I became a small businessman, got involved in politics, and I ended up, in a very fortunate way, I became a U.S. Congressman and was always drawn towards people in need, people in poverty, people that were hungry, and they formed this select committee on hunger in the U.S. Congress, and I became the chairman of its subcommittee on international hunger. So it was my job and responsibility to the Congress of the United States to travel overseas to very poor areas in Africa, Asia, South America, and to look at problems and report back to the Congress what I had seen, and to report back to our programs overseas. Was our food getting through? Were our programs working? What was happening? Where were we getting good value for our dollar, et cetera? And what kind of programs do we need to do a better job? And in my first travels, one of my first trips that I made, I just had my life turned around. I was in Ethiopia, and I saw 25 children die one morning, and
wow.
They died of hunger. And it was during the time of this amazing famine. When I say amazing, it was just a staggering famine, probably the worst famine in the last 60 or 70 years in Africa. It started off as a drought, and then it became a civil war, and the civil war turned into a famine, and it was all man-made. And by the time I got there, I was the first American ever to go into this continent or into this country. And by the time I got there, 1 million people had already died. And I tried to understand this. How can 1 million people die from hunger? This doesn't sound right. And so, but I went up country with Mother Teresa's group, Sisters of Charity. We were visiting a small clinic. And the Civil War was surrounding us. I mean, people were running for their lives, and they had come upon this plateau, and they had been they had been running for about, escaping with their lives for about 100 miles, and they got to this plateau, and it was somewhat peaceful up there, and they were just exhausted, and they just lied down and started to die. And when I got there, I had an aide with me, and as I walked through them, they thought, probably because I was a white guy and I looked a foreigner, they thought I was a doctor. That's the only thing that's the only reason I can understand, because they began to hand me their dead babies because they thought, he's a doctor and maybe he can revive my child. And so I was handed all these dead babies, and I saw 25 children die within about 15 minutes. I never got over it. So that started me on my crusade, and that was in 1984. So however many years that is ago, what is that, 34, 35, 36 years ago, I'm not sure. Do the math, whatever it is. I've been on that crusade. I think about that moment, that time, often. I can't get that out of my mind, and that has drawn me. I mean, it's pushed me to visit other countries. It's pushed me to do this work in Dayton, Ohio. It's pushed me to do work all over the world.
Now that the situation in Ethiopia is what led to African aid and a whole kind of world awareness about what was going on in Ethiopia, but what also was going on as far as world hunger.
Right.
And it sort of was the plateau of world concern. We had Hands Across America and all that sort of the MTV, is hot, very big at that time, and we had all this outreach of concern. But since then, on one hand, hunger institutionalized has gone down because aid is better delivered, and we still have these crisis situations. But what's your assessment of the work that's gone on with all the groups who've done this since?
We're making an impact. This might surprise you, and it might surprise even your listeners, but we've actually cut hunger in half in the world, and we've cut poverty in half. These programs that we initiated in the 80s, they work. School feeding, microcredit, microfinance for women, teaching mothers how to read and write, immunization of children, clean water, digging wells. These programs really, really work. And we have actually cut hunger in half. We have cut poverty in half, which is amazing. I mean, in those days, when I would make a speech about hunger, I would say, today, 42,000 people are going to die from hunger and hunger-related deaths. That was 35, 36 years ago. Now, when I make a speech about hunger, I say, today, 21,000 people will die of hunger. It's still a lot of people, 21,000 people.
In one day.
In one day. But we've more than cut it in half. So when I say we, the world community, the anti-hunger community, is making tremendous progress. These programs work. And the American people have been very generous in in this country and overseas.
Have they been generous enough?
You know, we're never generous enough because we can end hunger. This is something we know what to do. We know how to end this.
So the first time in world history, you think humanity is at a point where we have the know-how to end hunger?
We do. We know what to do. We believe that we can end hunger by the year 2030. There'll be no more hunger in the world or in the United States. We believe that. But, and this is a big one, we haven't developed the political will yet. In other words, we don't have enough elected officials that really care about this issue, or even know about this issue, or even are concerned about this issue. It's not big on their scope. They're not thinking about this. It's not an issue with them.
Yeah, well, it's out of sight, out of mind. You see some pictures on TV, and rarely a show like this, but it's out of sight. And so there's no real pressure other than the fact is, I think when you started out, there was some hunger. I know in the early 70s, we started to see homelessness in where people were actually homeless because there wasn't a job. I mean, you used to be able to rent a room for $25 a week and find a job pushing a broom, and you would be able to have a place to stay. But after the economic downturns, we saw homelessness and we saw real hunger in the United States. I know, well, myself, was in that situation where we ran out of food and actually was hungry for several days where we actually ran out of food. And then we got food stamps. And that was one of the programs that was aimed at helping people be able to feed themselves. It made it just night and day. One day we had nothing, and the next day we had some food.
And it's a good program. And the food stamps and the school lunch and the school breakfast, they really work. And a lot of people think that they're full of fraud. That's not true. They are very good programs. And let me throw out a statistic that it's going to floor you. That it's going to, and people are always surprised when I tell them this. If I were to ask you, what do you think the government spends on hunger, the federal government spends on hunger, versus what the individuals spend? Like, for example, here's the government, what they spend on hunger in America, and over here we'll put churches and synagogues and individuals and Bill Gates and everybody else, everything else in the government. What do you think the percentage is? This is very interesting.
I would suspect the public is much more generous than the government, especially now.
What do you think?
I would say that the government spends 1% or less of its budget on hunger.
Government spends 93% of all the food and of all the programs and money that go for domestic hunger. 93% of it comes from the federal government, and 7% comes from the private sector.
So it is the government.
The government, when you put school lunch, school breakfast, and
Meals on Wheels.
Meals on Wheels, and you put the nutrition programs and the food stamps together, these programs work. They absolutely work. And then you put everything else over here, what we do through donations and charity and stuff like that. Federal government has 93% and everybody else has 7%. That doesn't mean that we don't stop giving, but I get this question all the time. Don't you think that the churches and the synagogues and the individuals should pick this up? Yes, they should. It's the responsibility of us to do this. It's not the responsibility of the government to do it, but the government is doing it because the citizens are not picking it up. And that's what's happened.
I know you have a great quote from Mother Teresa when you were traveling with her. Would you like to share that with us?
I have a lot of great quotes from Mother Teresa.
Well, this one in particular has to do with what the individual can do
Yeah.
to help with pretty much any problem, really.
Yeah. She told me to do the thing that's in front of you. And I was with her in Calcutta, and she took me downtown to a very densely populated area with a lot of people that are very poor, living on top of one another. And I just couldn't believe how people were living. I mean, they were living on the street. They were actually living on the sidewalk, no shelter, sleeping on the sidewalk, sleeping on the street. And I said, where does one start? I thought, I'm supposed to be able to handle something like this. I said, where do you start with something like this? She didn't say anything to me at the time, and she went, and there was a man lying in the street. He looked almost dead. And she went and had him picked up and got some men to pick him up, and they brought him back to her hospice, and she began to clean him up and wash him off and love him and take good care of him. And she came back to me later in the afternoon. She said, look, not everybody can come to Calcutta like you. You go back to tell people in America, tell them to do the thing that's in front of them. And the point that she was making was, if everybody took care of their neighbor, if everybody did the thing that's in front of them, what's going on in your neighborhood? What's going on in your church? What's going on with your friend? Are you taking care of the thing that's in front of you? We don't all have to rush off to Calcutta. Do the thing that's in front of you. And she was kind of saying, although she didn't say it this way, if we all took care of the thing that's in front of us, we probably wouldn't need half the stuff we get from the government, because we take care of our problem.
Well, I agree with the sentiment. I just think that the problem is so, the economy, and one of the things that underlying causes there is, we talked earlier about the fact that, the population has grown, and that there are certain places in the world like North Korea that are that aren't well lended to grow enough food to support their population. And there's, extreme dry spells that lead to hunger, the wars, but the economic ups and downs of the economy. When, like I was saying, when the economy, we lost 130,000 manufacturing jobs here. That's where we saw a real increase in people needing housing and people needing food. And, we still have large unemployment and underemployment and low wages. People leave from check to check. And if everybody, we experienced when they closed some of these factories where whole neighborhoods had lots of people, and when their unemployment benefits ran out, they lost their homes, they lost their cars, they got all kinds of stuff happens to people.
Yeah.
And they thought they'd never end up in a food line, but you end up, when you have to eat, you have to go somewhere. And luckily here in Dayton we have food pantries and the House of Bread and a few other places that feed people that your group has really been involved in. But the economy has wrecked a lot of people. Now we have a video of some people that were affected. The budget struggles are happening now, and I don't know if you're, it's really unclear. I guess the budget just came out this last recently, and we still don't know how food programs are going to be impacted with the federal budget. But the state budget looks like it's about done, and the Ohio Association of Food Pantries interviewed people that were, receiving food, and we'd like to show that so it shows people that were directly impacted, and then we'll come back.
Good.
And so we could show the video, folks.
pantries at least 3 times a month, just because we're both full-time students and we have a 2-year-old. We don't make enough just to eat. I mean, there's days that, me and my husband don't eat just so my son can eat.
My husband, he's 64, disabled, and my 11-year-old grandson and myself. If it wasn't for going to the food pantries, we wouldn't eat much. We get $190 in food stamps, but with the price of food, I don't care how chintzy you are, you can't buy much with it. Time you buy flour and shortening, and if it wasn't for food banks, really, we would go hungry. So I'm thankful for every can that I could get.
I'm living off $172 a month. That's not enough. It doesn't last me but maybe a week. Food costs are rising, and there's just not enough to help me get through the month.
Work for this kind of thing, and we go to one other food distribution. Our family would be really struggling a lot. We struggle from time to time anyway, even though we do get food stamps. But my husband works. I just lost my job, which put a real dent in things. But even with that, it seems like there's never enough. Our kids are always hungry. They're growing. We need to have not just food, but healthy, real food. And this kind of thing, if it weren't for this, we wouldn't have access to a lot of produce, and they eat it. They love it. They love the fresh stuff, and they can't always afford that.
And I come here most of the time about once a month, and I'm telling you, it is a blessing for this place to be here, because if it wasn't for people like you, we would have nothing, because our checks do not go far enough anymore, because it seems like everything's going up and nothing's coming down. And these people are angels to us, because they are willing to give their time, their patience, and everything to help us. And if it wasn't for them, we would go hungry.
It's a good thing that they do this to help people that can't help themselves.
I have 2 kids. I struggle all the time feeding them, and if it wouldn't be for this actual pantry that actually gives meats and eggs for my kids, then I would have to worry about losing my kids from them going hungry.
The pantry's a big help, to not only to myself but to everyone. And sometimes in different times of the month, we run low on food, and they have real good food, very nutritious, fresh. We love it.
There's so many of us who just get this. If it weren't for this, we wouldn't eat at all. And I know a lot of people who don't eat at all. Cat food. I've been there. Don't stop.
It's a blessing for all of us. Like I said, it's hard when I work and my husband works, and I'm diabetic, so I have to buy my insulin and everything, and I have insurance through my husband's work, but when you have to scrape your pennies together to try and feed 5 children that are hungry all the time, the apples, the potatoes, frying them up, mashing them, anything and everything we can do with them. They love fried cabbage, so we'll cut the cabbage up and fry it when we get the cabbage. Carrots, I cut them up, I freeze them. Sweet potatoes, I cut up, I freeze, I put them in bags, and the kids love sweet potatoes, so I make sweet potatoes quite a bit. I really hope that they keep funding the food for the program. It helps a lot of different families, not just mine, for them to be able to get free food and have that help just a little bit is the best help that the state can give anybody.
Those are people that were interviewed in Columbus last winter that obviously, went to food banks and food pantries that we have gobs of them here in the Miami Valley. And so that kind of program that your effort here in Montgomery County have been helping, and I know that you're also working on a grocery store for the food desert.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So when did you realize that hunger was a big issue for the Miami Valley?
Well, we started to see these amazing signs. I'd say over a couple years ago, and there was this little article in the paper that said that it was just about that high, and that I read in the paper. The Dayton paper said that Dayton was the 4th hungriest city in the country. And I thought, well, how can that be? And I called my friend Rick Carney here in town, and I said, Rick, this can't be right. I mean, I can't believe that. I said, at one time when I was a congressman, we were what I called a hunger-free community. We had so many programs going, and we were on top of the world as far as the programs and feeding people, and we could almost really say that nobody went to bed hungry in this town because we had that kind of a program. Well, I sent somebody in here, and I had an intern working for me, and I said, look, I want you to go into Dayton, I'll pay for it, do some research, I want you to find out if that article is true. And I paid for it, and I want to find out, are we the 4th hungriest city in the country? And she came in and took a look around, did the research, looked at all the things that they looked at, and she said, well, if we're not the 4th hungriest city, we're in the top 10. And we have a problem here. A lot of it had to do with all these manufacturing jobs, all these factories that closed, because these were good jobs. These were jobs that paid $28 to $30 an hour before benefits, and we lost great jobs, and they affected a lot of families, and a lot of programs that we had stopped. And so when you had high unemployment with well-paying jobs, and now these people are either underemployed or not employed at all, you got a problem. And so I said, this is my home, and I want to do something about it. And so through a foundation, the Jack Eichelberger Foundation, that's located here in town, they supported, and we started what we call the Hall Hunger Initiative with a few employees to start this effort to try to turn this thing around, which we will. But it took 15 years to get here where we are. It took about 15 years to create a situation in which we are the 4th or 5th or 6th hungriest city in the country, and it's going to take a while to turn it around. And we're starting to do that. United Way and Montgomery County have been amazing in their effort to work with us, the Hall Hunger Initiative, and putting together, a program to work on what we call food insecurity here. And they did a survey, a 3-year survey, and they found out that and they wanted to be sure that through United Way and through the county, that the money that they were going to spend, that they wanted to be sure that people were getting their money's worth, that they would spend it on programs of the highest priority. And the 2 highest priorities, according to that survey, were food insecurity and drugs, opiates. So we're involved. The Hall Hunger Initiative is involved with United Way and the county, and bringing about a program to help people to realize, number one, we got a hunger problem, and this is a great city, and I don't want to be known as the 4th hungriest city in the country. We got to change that now. But 2, we also got a food desert. or food deserts. We got places in this city and in this county that are underserved, that do not have a grocery store. And we're going to change that. And we've got an amazing food bank, and we've got some great food pantries, but we've got programs that we also need to bring into this county that are not here. People that I know that do great programs elsewhere. We need to borrow from other people that are doing other works in other states and other cities and learn from them. And we need to work together. And so that's what the Hall Hunger Initiative is about, is trying to bring about change, bring about working together, and bringing about a new way of doing things, and bringing about the fact that we're not going to be the fourth hungriest city in the country. I don't even want to be listed. I don't even want to be listed anymore. It's going to take us a while to do that. But we know what to do, and it's just going to take all of us. We've got some good people here. It's good groups here. We just got to work together.
Do you do a combination of, of advocacy for things like the whole question is whether they're going to cut food stamps again?
Yeah.
I mean, they cut the food stamp program, I think, 3 times in the last 2 years. And they cut unemployment extension program too, which meant I think 75,000 people in Ohio lost their unemployment benefits because of those cuts. But the new budget, how do we advocate on one end and then help guarantee services at the other end?
This budget that has been introduced by the president is the worst budget I've ever seen. It hurts hungry and needy and poor people. It's draconian. It zeroes out lots of programs. It cuts food stamps, it cuts nutrition programs, it cuts school lunch, it cuts famine funds to people that are dying. It cuts all of these programs it cuts almost every one of these programs, even if it's even if you've never even heard of the program, it cuts it by 25%. I mean, and it cuts Medicaid. I mean, it devastates poor people. It's the worst budget that's ever been introduced into the Congress of the United States. If it were to pass, it would throw so many people on the street. It would hurt so many people. I don't know how we would ever recover. I don't think it's going to pass. But if we don't fight this as a people, as a group, if we don't fight this in a bipartisan fashion, I mean, if we don't let our elected officials know that this is wrong, then if we don't tell them that you cannot vote for something like this, then they will vote for it. Because when a president of the United States picks up the phone and calls you as a congressman or senator, it's pretty hard to say no to him. But he needs the congressman or the senator, or he or she, or whatever they are, whoever they are, he needs to know that his district, his state is behind him, that he is going to go against the president. He's not going to vote for this budget. This budget hurts people, and it's the worst budget I've ever seen.
Well, they came out with their draft health care, which includes major cuts to Medicare. Medicaid, sorry. Really huge amounts, in which, here in Ohio, we've just had a whole lot of people that were able to get on, either because you have to be very low income to get on there, or disabled. And so we have a lot of people who are low income for the first time were able to get health care in a long time. And then it's in both the House version and the Senate version now, these cuts. There are a number of senators who say they're not going to vote for it. Our group has been involved in the health care issue for a long time. We mainly support the single-payer health care form, but we certainly supported and fought for the expansion of Medicare. But the budget, how they're going to squeeze the votes out, it's going to be a real tight fight.
Right, and it's gonna undo the health care bill that was passed in the last administration, and it will put a lot of people that were insured that had health care. They will not be insured anymore if this bill were to pass. It will probably uninsure somewhere between 14 and 20 million people.
Yeah. Well, we're certainly into fighting those health care cuts and the budget. The budget is a top priority for, we know the block grants are, and home heating program, all that stuff is on the cutting block. And unfortunately, it's like they pit, the VA against education and homes against, meals for seniors against other programs, so that everybody's trying to fight for their part of the pie. And across the board, what's in there is like you say, a tremendous hit on the American workers and American middle class and poor people.
Well, they pit the poor people against rich people is what they do, and against defense. What they've done is they've said, let's increase defense, let's increase our programs to the rich, and what we'll do is we'll sacrifice the poor. And that's exactly what they've done in this budget. That's who they have chosen, the Defense Department, to get a substantial increase in money, and they've chosen the rich to get the benefits. And the poor, well, they've said drop dead.
So your group will be working on this, our group will be working on this?
We'll be working on this, we'll be advocating, we'll be educating, we'll be saying, you've got to call your congressmen, your senators, your governors, your state representatives. You cannot vote for this budget. You cannot vote for this budget. This is the worst budget I've ever seen. This will hurt your district, it will hurt the people, and you will, it not only hurts hunger, it hurts sick people, it hurts health care, it hurts people that are going to need help during the cold winter months. It needs people that are probably, that have, that need long-term health care, Meals on Wheels, all those kind of programs. They're going to be eliminated. Famine programs overseas, eliminated. So the people there are 4 famines now in Africa.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. There are 4 famines in Africa. There are 20 million people that are facing death. Now, there's a difference between hunger overseas and hunger here. We only spend, while we spend billions of dollars on the poor and the sick in America, overseas we only spend 0.5% on the poor overseas. So I want people to realize we don't spend a lot of money on poor people overseas, but we do try to help people that are in dire straits over there. If they're facing a famine and they're dying, we try to get them food. There are 4 countries facing famine now: Somalia, South Sudan, Nigeria, and Yemen. And there are 20 million people affected. There are more people now that are hungry in this world than since World War II. It's pretty staggering. And the difference between the people in Africa and the people in the United States that are hungry is the people in the United States that are hungry, they're going to go to bed 2 or 3 days out of every month without eating. they're not going to drop dead. I mean, they're going to be malnourished and hurting. The people overseas, they're dead. They're going to die. They are dying in alarming numbers. So we got to get them food to keep them from dying. Well, President Trump's budget wants to cut off all food programs to the famine victims. I mean, I'm not talking about cutting food programs. I'm talking about eliminating the food programs. We're not talking about cutting them in half. I'm not talking about cutting 100 million. I'm talking about zero.
And so,
I mean, do we understand what we're talking about here? We're talking about eliminating it.
eliminating totally.
Totally.
And this is in a situation where people are going to die directly as a result.
They're going to die. And the countries of the world, they follow what the United States does. So Germany and France and Australia and Great Britain. So if the United States cuts their budget, these other countries, they follow us. We're the leader.
So what are those 4 countries? I think we have a map of world hunger, and we might show that what we mentioned. But go over these 4 countries so we can focus.
It's Nigeria, Sudan, South Sudan, Yemen, and Somalia. Now, let me tell you that these countries, a couple of them have civil war, and some of these countries, it's man-made. You know, it just didn't happen that these all of a sudden famine.
Well, there's civil war in all 4 of these.
In parts of them, not in the whole country. But the problem is that a lot of this is man-made. So, I mean, what is our duty and our responsibility? Is it our responsibility to try to help save some lives? Yeah, it is. It is. I think, what is our responsibility as a nation? Is it our responsibility to sit on the sideline and watch them die? Is it our responsibility in America to help poor people because, you know, they're not making a living wage? Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. You know, I think that's what the United States is really known for. I think that's what we're known for justice, and we're known for freedom, and we're known for loving our neighbor. And if we don't do this, I mean, what are we supposed to? Are we supposed to take care of the rich? Where does it say that in the scripture? I haven't read it. I read the scriptures, and I'm a person of faith, and it says there's 2,500 verses in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, whichever you read. And God is very clear that we are to be involved. We are to help the sick, the hungry, the people in prison, the orphans, and the widows. And he doesn't say, no, I want you to help that rich guy. I want you to take care of him. You take care of that rich guy. He says, you help the people that are hurting. That's what we're known for. And if we turn our back on that, then we're not much.
Well, it seems like a certain part of the population is ready to do that. They're ready not, and I think it's because they think we're known for giving our money away and that it goes to poor people. In reality, like you say, that most of the money that we've given away anywhere goes to either rich people or middle class people, mostly.
Our people are good people in America.
Sure.
Our people are very good people.
Excellent.
They always has been. What I worry about is our politicians are not, they're not involved with this issue. And they're not knowledgeable about this issue. They're not educated about this issue. And a lot of them are not concerned about this issue. And we have not developed a political will among them to end this. We can end this. This is not rocket scientist kind of stuff. We know how to take care of these people. We can end this.
Yeah, it's for a while, for at least the last 30 or 40 years, we've had the food and the technology to do that.
And we are, as I said at the beginning of the program, we've cut poverty in half and we've cut hunger in half. These programs work. Simple things. School feeding, teach mothers how to read and write, microcredit and microfinance, immunization of children. Stuff works.
Just take care of the basics.
Take care of the basics.
So it seems to me that we're at this point, a really fundamental point where, you know, like we talked earlier about African aid, and that juncture there was this outpouring of concern, but it was, you know, rock musicians and what was the song? African aid.
We Are the World.
We Are the World.
Yeah.
We need some kind of effort on that scale to really sort of capture the momentum and the attention to do it. Otherwise, the dark side, it seems to be in charge.
Yes, but from your point of view, how did we get from the point where this was an issue that was a regular thing, it was a household thing, people knew that this was an issue, and now it doesn't seem to be that anyone is thinking about starvation in Africa. We might be thinking about starvation in Yemen because we are contributing to that problem, but on a global scale, we're not concerned with hunger.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it's one of my great frustrations because it's an issue and I've been dealing with for many, many years, and the people seem to only respond when, you know, there's a catastrophe. You know, if they see destruction or they see masses of people dying, they will respond to that.
Yeah, we saw that with the people that died with the gassing in Syria, but there's catastrophes in Syria and across the globe all the time.
We have 40 crises every year. I mean, there's 40 going on right now. I mean, there's a tsunami almost every 2 weeks in the world. I mean, it's kind of a silent tsunami. I mean, there's 21,000 people that will die today, this morning, and throughout the day from hunger and hunger-related deaths. I mean, there's 40 crises going on right now. So what do we do? And you know, it's a good question because it's a frustrating one for me because the press and the media and the politicians don't pay attention to it unless it becomes sensational.
Mm-hmm.
The only way I have found to change anybody's opinion about this is you have to take them and see it. You have to make it personal. I can talk to you about 21,000 people that are going to die today. I can show you pictures of somebody dying, but you're going to turn the television off. And those facts are going to go like that beyond your head. But if I take you to Somalia, and if I take Congressman to Somalia, and I'm taking a trip like in August, I'm going to Guatemala and I'm going to take a few congressmen down there and I'm going to show them some things that are going on down there. I'm going to take them into the hills and show them, you know, 45% of the people in Guatemala are malnourished. I'm going to show them what malnutrition looks like. And they'll come back different people. When I've done that, it really works. You have to take them, you have to show them, you have to change their heart. You have to take them and show them. You have to touch them. And the only way to do that is, like in Dayton, Ohio, if you want to change somebody about the situation in Dayton, Ohio, if you want to tell them about hunger in Dayton, Ohio, because a lot of people don't know about hunger in Dayton, Ohio, is take them and let them talk to a mother with children and have her sit down and talk to them about, you know, she's not making a living wage and along about the 21st or the 23rd of that month, after she's paid her rent bill and she's paid her utility bill and who knows what, after she's paid most of her bills, she's out of money. She's going to a food pantry. No. So why is she going to a food pantry? Well, if your friends or a politician sits down and talks that, he or she starts to realize, geez, this is a problem. That living wage that she's making, $12 an hour or $10 an hour, she can't make it. She's not making it. That's if she has no problems. If she has no sickness in her family, if her car doesn't break down, if she has a car.
Yeah.
So if we can get people to actually see it and we can make it personal, we will change their mind. That's the way we do it. That always works, and I've seen that work 50 times, but we have to do it that way. That's the only way. I can't sit and tell you. I can give you facts and statistics, but your eyes are gonna gloss over after a while. You're gonna get tired of me saying it. It's gotta be personal.
Well, it has to be personal, but I think it makes a big difference what we're doing here, you know, and I think that the majority of people can be reached by reason because they have some linkage to it. Most of the working people here in Dayton have either seen what's happened with unemployment, but seen what's happened with poverty themselves, that they know that it's hard to make ends meet. But we really appreciate what you've been doing, and I think, like we were saying, it's really, we're at a very crucial point where we're going to have to either turn enough people around by showing them, or the number of people dying each day will go up greatly.
This is an important show. You've taken an hour to talk about this, and normally when you're on television, you get 30 seconds.
Yeah, soundbite.
Yeah, you've taken an hour to talk about this, and this is good. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for coming.
We appreciate that, and we want to work with you, and we think, like I say, this is everybody out there watching and people working on the show here. You can't just walk away from this. You have to stand up, and there's a movement being born here again. We went through a long period where people were passive about, it looked like the government was going to take care of everybody, and now it's clear that it's only going to take care of a few people, and those people are already taken care of.
Well, that's what we need. We need a movement. That's exactly what we need, a movement.
Well, we're about building it and bringing it together, but you could be very, you are very important to changing people's consciousness and building the kind of unity that's going to build that movement.
I hope so. Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk. You work with the Hall Hunger Initiative. You were the previous director of the Alliance to End Hunger, and I know you still work with them in D.C.
I do.
Nationally. And so thanks a lot, and we will get the word out and spread the word that we're going to fight hunger and for social change here in the United States and around the world.
Good for you. Thank you very much. Good to see you. Thanks.